Just after 10 o'clock on a cold November night, a young woman called 911. Her voice was shaking. She told the operator that men had broken into her home, that they had tied her to a banister, that she had heard gunshots downstairs where her parents were. Everything about that call was true: the men, the gunshots, the blood, everything except the one detail that mattered. She wasn't a victim. She was the reason they were there. History remembers the headlines, the verdict, the mugshot. But underneath every headline there are pages no one wanted you to read: the quiet years before the crime, where an ordinary family slowly came apart in a house that looked perfect from the street. This is buried pages. Tonight, the daughter they called perfect and the secret that ended in her parents' blood. To everyone who knew them, the Pan family was a success story. They had come to Canada from Vietnam with almost nothing. They worked relentless hours in auto parts factories, the kind of work that ages your hands before your face, and out of those hours they built something solid. A comfortable home in Markham, a quiet suburb north of Toronto. A house, 2 cars, 2 children, and a daughter who seemed to justify every sacrifice they had ever made. Her name was Jennifer. On paper, she was the dream. A straight-A student, an award-winning figure skater, a gifted pianist. Her parents believed she was on her way to becoming a pharmacist, that she had graduated high school with honors, earned a scholarship, and enrolled in university in the city. They believed it because Jennifer showed them the proof. The problem was that almost none of it was real. For years, Jennifer Pan had been building a second life out of paper. According to the case against her, she forged her report cards. She faked a high school diploma. She fabricated university acceptance letters, and then pretended, semester after semester, to attend classes she had never enrolled in. Think about what that actually takes, day after day. She invented study schedules and left them where her parents would see. She told them she was volunteering at a hospital. On the days she was supposed to be in lectures, she would leave the house with a backpack, ride the bus into the city, and spend the hours somewhere else with friends, with her boyfriend, then come home and play the part of a tired student. She is even said to have produced the small, convincing details a suspicious parent might check. It was an extraordinary amount of work, not to succeed, but to appear to succeed. And here is the unsettling part. For a long time it held, not because she was a criminal mastermind, but because the people she was lying to wanted more than anything to believe her. And a lie like that is not a single event. It's a job. Every morning the story has to be maintained. Every question has to be answered before it's asked. A real student forgets things, complains about a professor, brings home the ordinary friction of a real life. A fake one has to manufacture all of that, the right amount of stress, the right grades, the right exhaustion, and never slip, not once, for years. It is a strange kind of discipline. The discipline of a person who has decided that the truth is the one thing she cannot afford. And the longer it works, the more impossible it becomes to ever stop. Because to stop is to confess all of it at once. To understand how a lie gets that big, you have to understand the pressure it was hiding from. The Pan household ran on a single, simple expectation: excellence. Hann and Bich Pan had sacrificed everything so their children could have the future they never got. And in their minds, the way you honored that sacrifice was to be the best at school, at music, at everything. There was little room for failure, and almost no room for an ordinary life. Now let's be careful here. Strict, demanding parents are not a crime. Millions of children grow up under high expectations and become decent, honest adults. Expectation did not make Jennifer do what she did, but it does explain the shape of the trap, because in that house, disappointing her parents didn't feel survivable. So when Jennifer wasn't perfect, and no one is, she didn't admit it. She hid it. And a hidden failure has a way of demanding more lies to protect it. One covered the next, until the gap between the daughter she was pretending to be and the daughter she actually was had grown into a canyon she could no longer climb out of. This is the quiet engine under so many of these stories. Not a single monstrous choice, but 1,000 small ones, each easier than telling the truth. Then she fell in love with the wrong person as far as her parents were concerned. His name was Daniel Wung. He worked at a restaurant. He sold drugs on the side. He was, in almost every way, the opposite of the future the Pans had planned for their daughter. When they found out about the relationship, they forbade it. And eventually, the whole paper world came down. Her parents discovered that the university story was a lie that there was no campus, no scholarship, no degree on the way. Imagine that moment. Imagine learning that years of your child's life, the lectures, the schedule, the future you were so proud of never existed. The trust in that house collapsed overnight. What replaced it was control. Jennifer, by then a grown woman in her 20s, was placed under something close to house arrest. Her parents restricted her phone. They limited the car. They tracked where she went and who she saw. The relationship with Daniel Wang was supposed to be over. For a while, Jennifer obeyed. And then, slowly, the relationship fell apart on its own. Daniel began seeing someone else, and the one thing Jennifer had been willing to risk everything for was slipping out of her hands. So look at where she was. The fake life had been exposed. The real life was being supervised by the very people she had spent years deceiving. The escape hatch Daniel was closing. She was a grown adult living as a watched child with no honest way back and no door out. And somewhere inside that pressure, the conversations changed. What had started as a daughter venting about strict parents turned into something darker, talk of getting rid of them, permanently. It's worth pausing here because this is the part people find hardest to believe. How does anyone get from a hidden report card to a plan to kill their own parents? The answer is rarely a single, sudden snap. It's a slow staircase. Each step feels small compared to the one before it. The first lie makes the second one easier. Hiding the failure makes hiding the relationship easier. Hiding the relationship makes the next deception feel almost normal. By the time the truly unthinkable enters the conversation, a person has already spent years quietly teaching themselves that the rules don't apply to them, that consequences are things that happen to other people. None of that excuses what came next. Plenty of people are trapped and lied to and heartbroken, and they never harm anyone. But it explains how someone walks up a staircase like this one without ever feeling like they've left the ground. This is the part that's hard to say out loud because of how ordinary it sounds at first. There was no criminal genius here, no master plan. According to prosecutors, Jennifer first tried to arrange her father's death for a small sum of money, and the person she approached said no. That should have been the end of it. For most people, hearing no is the moment you wake up from the fantasy. For Jennifer, it was just a problem to root around. Through Daniel Wang, she connected with men willing to do it for money, among them Lenford Crawford and David Milviganum. The promise, the Crown said, was that they would be paid out of the life insurance money that would come once her parents were gone. And the plan had a cover story built in. It would not look like a daughter killing her family. It would look like the suburb's oldest fear, a home invasion, strangers in the night who came for money and left bodies behind. To sell it, Jennifer wouldn't stand apart from the violence. She would be inside it. A victim, tied up, spared. On the night of November 8th, 2010, she let them in. 3 men entered the Pan home in Markham. Hann and Bich Pan were forced down to the basement of the house they had worked their whole lives to own. And there, they were shot, execution style. Bich Pan, Jennifer's mother, was killed. Hann Pan, her father, was shot in the face. By every reasonable expectation, he should have died too, but he didn't. He lay still in the dark, playing dead, while the men finished and left. And then shot, bleeding, his wife dead beside him. This man dragged himself up and out of his own home to a neighbor for help. He survived, and his survival is the reason we know this story at all. Upstairs, the performance was already running. Jennifer was found near the staircase, and she told police a terrifying story. Intruders, a robbery gone wrong, a daughter who had been tied up and forced to listen as her parents were attacked below. She had made the 911 call. She had said all the right things in all the right ways. For the first hours, she was exactly what she appeared to be, the surviving daughter of a murdered family. She had been performing a fake life for years. Performing a fake grief was just one more page. The lie had worked for almost a decade. It did not survive the investigation. The first crack came from the man who was supposed to be dead. Hann Pan lived, and when he was able to speak, his account did not match his daughter's. He testified that during the so-called home invasion, he had seen something that didn't belong in a robbery at all, his daughter, moving freely, speaking calmly with one of the intruders, as if she knew him. A woman who has been bound and terrified does not stand and chat with the men who are about to kill her parents. That single image, a father's testimony against his own child, sat at the center of the case. Then investigators did what investigators do. They pulled the phones. and the phones told a very different story than the one Jennifer had given the 911 operator. In the call records and the messages, police found a trail of communication around the plan, contact with the men involved, around the timing, around the money. The terrified, tied-up victim had once again left a paper trail of her own making. Think about the cruel symmetry of that. The same instinct that built her fake university, the documents, the records, the carefully managed evidence, was the very thing that now buried her. She had always lived through paper, and paper remembers. A person can rehearse a story until it sounds flawless, but a phone doesn't rehearse. It simply records who you called and when and how often, and the cold timeline it produces doesn't care how convincing you are. Then there was the interrogation. Police brought Jennifer in and questioned her at length, and that long conversation was later played in court. At first she held the line, the frightened daughter, the home invasion, the version she had told from the beginning. But a practiced lie has a weakness. It has to stay perfectly consistent forever against people whose entire job is to find the seam. Detail by detail, the account she had built started to contradict itself and the evidence around it. The performance that had fooled two loving parents for the better part of a decade could not survive a room full of people who had already stopped believing her. In the interrogation room, the story she had rehearsed began to come apart under its own weight. The same gift that had fooled her parents for years, the ability to lie smoothly, completely, without flinching, had finally met something that doesn't blink. Evidence doesn't get tired. It doesn't want to believe you. Piece by piece, the performance fell away. In December 2014, after a long trial, Jennifer Pan was found guilty of first-degree murder for her mother's death and attempted murder for her father's. Daniel Wung, Lenford Crawford, and David Milviganam were convicted alongside her. In 2015, she was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. But this case did not end there. Years later, an appeals court found problems with how the jury in the original trial had been instructed and ordered new murder trials, a decision Canada's Supreme Court upheld in 2025, while leaving the attempted murder convictions in place. Rather than face another full first-degree murder trial, Jennifer Pan pleaded guilty to manslaughter in her mother's death. She remains sentenced to life, but under that plea, she is now eligible one day to apply for parole. More than a decade after that November night, the final pages of this story are still being written. It's tempting to look at a case like this and search for a monster. But the buried pages here don't tell the story of a monster. They tell the story of a lie that started small, a bad grade hidden, a relationship denied, and was allowed to grow, unchallenged, in a house where the truth had become too expensive to tell. A mother died for that lie. A father survived to carry it for the rest of his life. The pressure to be perfect didn't pull the trigger, but it built the room where a daughter came to believe that the people who loved her were easier to erase than to disappoint. That is the most disturbing page in this whole file. Not that she was incapable of love, but that somewhere along the way, the lie became more important to protect than the people she was lying to. That's the page most people skip, and it's exactly the kind of page we'll keep digging up here on Buried Pages. If this story held you, stay with us, because the next one is already waiting to be uncovered.